This is update for June 30th, 2024, day 858 of the war, end of the date update. Also, catch up for June 29 and June 28. So, I'm going to start as always with general strategic updates, and then I'm going to switch to the situation battlefield. And the general updates are going to be, I'm going to start with macroeconomic updates because they do matter, and I would argue, define everything else. So there was some. I would say I just pulled the key information. Is there was a CPI, or basically Consumer Price Inflation Index from France for June, which showed declining inflation. It's closer to 2%, which is typical target for most developed central banks. Which means that European Central Bank probably will decrease interest rates even further. There was already one decrease, so this kind of justifies potentially decreasing interest rates. At the same time, also German unemployment starting to slowly but surely go up. As you can see, from 5.9 to 6%. This also may justify decrease in central bank interest rates. Things are not truly under control, but there is sort of pressure, as I mentioned before, to decrease interest rates, which is what ECB started doing. Now let's move to the US. Key point here is that is not really going up that much. It jumped a little bit at the end of May, beginning June, but essentially stabilized for the most of the months. And I would argue it being stable for past 3.5 months, which is pretty surprising and usual, but nevertheless, the debt is not going that much. Now let's, which is positive sign, generally speaking. And then if we move to the employment situation in the US, so the same trend that I mentioned before continues, and actually getting to the point that it's going to get to be affecting and becoming sort of more public. So I mentioned before, there are two parts of this employment situation, which includes initial claim and jobless claims. Basically, it's people who are just laid off and they go and apply for benefits, and so that's a number we see. That number is actually, and there is seasonal adjustment and non-seasonal adjusted. Both numbers are actually going down. So basically, what this really means that economy is really not laying off people generally in the US. It's fairly stable, at least not right now. However, if we go to continuing jobless claims, it means people who lost their job in prior periods and they just remain on this unemployment benefits. And so that number is actually starting to go up. So if we compare it to previous week, it was 1.828. Now it's 1.839. And similar situation for non-seasonally adjusted. So both of them are clearly pointing to one picture, is that economy is not really hiring. It's not firing people, but at the same time, it's not hiring. So it's kind of like a equilibrium balance, and this balance is moving slowly in the negative direction, because obviously this number of unemployed people grows, and eventually it will affect the rest of the economy because the spending is gonna go down. On the sort of positive side in the US, the consumer price consumption index expenditures is down, as you can see. Both core and like general, they going down consistently, which again opens up possibility for U.S. central bank, which is called Federal Reserve, to reduce rates probably down towards the end of the year, as but also dependent on unemployment situation. So far, it still was in a reasonable range, but as I stated, it points in a negative direction. But it's very, very sort of slow moving, slowly developing situation so far. Then I just want to provide a quick update on China, what's going on there. So I just picked one number, which is manufacturing PMI. It's basically purchasing manager index for manufacturing companies. And it just remains in a negative territory. So prior period in May, it dropped to 49.5, and it just remains in June in that area. However, there are some changes. So first of all, prices are going down. So basically, because there is lower demand, so the prices paid for inputs are down. So basically, it's somewhat deflationary, which probably will also translate to some extent that deflation will go eventually to the Western world, and that will help with the goods part of the inflation. However, service part of inflation, this is not going to sort of solve, and especially in the US, that's where the services are a major part of the spending. So basically, this is not going to sort of help that much. But if we look at the situation with new orders, they slightly down. So there is actually, despite the top line number looks the same, actually the key components were somewhat deteriorating. So first of all, new orders a little bit down. And then if we look at the new export orders, things remain more or less the same. So basically, there's not really meaningful change. The only interesting part is that all types of companies now, in terms of export orders, are in negative. In the past, medium companies were still positive, growing. However, small companies a little bit are not as bad situation. so overall, it still produced the same number. Basically, there was sort of redistribution of this sort of negative numbers to the point that medium companies are not growing, but small companies are declining at lower, declining slower. So basically, this essentially, as I stated, there is no real change there. Now let's switch to sort of a little bit more political developments, and I'm gonna mention a little bit what's going on in Israel. I mentioned about it in a previous video that there is indication of impending large-scale conflict where Israel may invade Lebanon and attack Hezbollah, and there are more reasons why it could be extremely dangerous development of things. So first, as you can see, this is countries that are part of this Arab League of Nations, and they not designating Hezbollah as terrorist organization anymore. It actually was designated as terrorist organization among Arab countries, and now it's sort of that designation was removed, so it's sort of call it normal organization. I guess that's a way way to say it. What this really means is that Arab countries are basically telling Israel not to attack Lebanon. It's indirect sort of threat that if you attack Hezbollah in particular, some of these countries may engage in this conflict. And Iran obviously was upfront that they will engage in the conflict if Lebanon and Hezbollah are attacked. Also, U.S. Government is requesting Iraq to create no-fly zone for Iranian aircraft, which I don't think that's going to happen, but that's a request. Also, there is information that the Egyptian armed forces are moving closer to the Israel border. So things are really getting heated up where Iran, Egypt, potentially Turkey could get involved in this conflict on one side, and obviously Hezbollah, and then Israel, and then sort of West, but there is not really much of sort of real help from the West because simply these countries outnumber, and they have equipment that's not terribly outdated, pretty advanced equipment. So things can really get out of control, and and the other part of it is what's happening is that Iran is effectively provoking Israel to attack Hezbollah and Lebanon by launching these harassing attacks against northern part of Israel, and the whole idea is to provoke for the because there is first mover disadvantage. Typically, it's advantage, but in the case of war, is actually first mover disadvantage. So whoever starts the war is going to get blamed, and all of going to get all of sort of problems and everything, unless you win the war. Obviously, in that case, the things are different. But nevertheless, from in terms of international politics, this will lead to potential economic boycott of Israel, and so basically, this will open up another front, not just directly in Lebanon, but generally economic and strategic front against Israel. And so that's basically what Iran is trying to do, is to provoke Israel to do that. But to be fair, Israel attempted to do the same thing with attacking, I think it was Iranian embassy or consulate or something, where if you recall, there was retaliation from Iran. They launched some missile attack against Israel that was, I would say, just a show. So again, there is this game, and I would say extremely dangerous game going on in the Near East. Now I'm actually going to switch to Ukraine a little bit. And I mentioned before that Ukraine is heading to some kind of 1917 moment. How it's going to play out, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But Ukrainian president and his political group switched tune and now started conversation about peace talks with Russia. An internal propaganda machine in Ukraine started sort of prepping people, saying, okay, well, losing territories is okay as long as we still have capital, and just basically all that nonsense. So in response, one of the commanders of the Azov brigade, and to be fair, it's really division, and to be more specific, actually original Azov, not the one that's part of Ukrainian military, but it's actually the one that's part of Ukrainian National Guard, because that was original Azov was part of National Guard. It wasn't in the military; it was in the National Guard, and it remains in the National Guard. So that original Azov, one of the commanders, as you can see, declared, basically stated, made a threat to Ukrainian president. If you can read, I translated it using Google Translate. And effectively, it's if Ukrainian president decides to sign peace with Russia, he will be removed. And that's really the essence of the message. And it was very sort of blunt and very direct. And obviously, during the war, people don't mince words, and the actions follow very quickly. So again, this is another sign that Ukraine is heading towards its 1917 moment. There is more things in Ukraine that also telling that significant portion of population are not willing, as I mentioned before, to fight for the government that they believe is completely corrupt and not serving their best interest. So there is increasing number of attempts to basically run away from Ukraine to either Hungary or Romania. Those are two main countries where Ukrainian men flee, and it got to the point that Ukrainian border guards squad catching daily 20, 30, 40, 50 people. This is pretty significant number. It wasn't like that. It used to be 2, 3, 5. Now it's literally like the largest was like 50 people, and it got to the point that people who run away, they become aggressive and violent and sort of fight back. And also Ukrainian border guard becomes violent and aggressive in return. And so they killed one of the person who attempted to cross the border and run away, and wounded another one. So this is a sort of totally new development where it's, it's clearly confrontational, and it's not that hard to get firearms in Ukraine, obviously, as you can imagine, because of the war, and including hand grenades and things of that nature. So this really can, this process may become, not very soon, but in, let's say, 6 months or even less, much more aggressive, to the point that it may become unstoppable in some ways. So again, there's another indication that things are not going in the right direction for Ukraine. There is another development that's happening with Belarus, which is country right north of Ukraine. And Russia actually invaded at the beginning of the war Ukraine through Belarus. They attacked towards Kiev. And Belarus government, and specifically Minister of Defense, and you can see this is Minister of Defense. He even gave interview to media, to Belarus media, stating that there is rising tension on Ukrainian border, and he was blaming Ukraine, obviously, that it's amassing troops to attack Belarus. And in response, Belarus government is sending troops to the border with Ukraine, and you can see some of this multiple rocket launchers that being brought to Ukrainian border, and some other Belarus units are moving to Ukrainian border. The area where they going to is near a town called Ovruch. So that would be, if, let's say, there is desire to attack Ukraine, that would be again, attack against Kyiv, and I'll show you on the map once we get to map of Ukraine. But again, this is obviously Ukraine does not have resources to attack Belarus, obviously, as you can imagine. So this is apparently preparations for some kind of renewed attack, even though it's extremely unclear where the resources are, or this is just psychological warfare that being played by Russia, because obviously Belarus is effectively extension of Russia, and actually not only Russia but also close relationship with China. And what you see here is a couple days ago, Chinese military transport airplane landed in Minsk, which is capital of Belarus, and brought Chinese soldiers. So you can see those, and they're gonna be participating in a parade, Independence Day parade on July 3rd in Minsk. So this just a symbolic sign of the ties and growing ties, where Chinese military is effectively marching on a parade in Minsk. So hopefully that just gives you sort of feeling of how close, and this is sort of tip of the iceberg of what's happening. And by the way, similar Chinese military transport airplane was going to Russia. It's unclear what was going on there, what they were transporting. But there is also movement of some apparently military material from China to Russia, but unclear what it is at this point. Now I'm going to switch a little bit to different topic, but in some way it is strategic and important, and part of the reason why Ukraine is losing this war. So what you see here is actually Ukrainian airplane. It's called Yak-52. It's a training airplane from essentially like World War II airplane, or even pre-World War II, in terms of its design. I'm not saying it was manufactured then, but in terms of its what it is effectively. And things are getting so desperate for Ukraine in terms of Russia's reconnaissance UAVs, and specifically Arlan 10s. If you remember, I made several videos, and it was a long time ago, more than a year, about Arlans, how important they are, how critical. And this actual example that Ukrainian military got so desperate that they're using this training airplane to shoot down Arlans that are flying. It is near Odessa, because they fly at pretty high, well, relatively high altitude for UAV at 6 kilometers. And so you cannot really shoot it down, and it's fairly small and inexpensive, and so using regular anti-air missiles really doesn't work. So the Ukraine military decided to do this ad hoc solution where they bring this Yak-52, and actually second pilot literally shooting down with firearms, personal firearms, this Russian UAVs. And you can see even there is here yellow, sort of kind of like yellow signs for the number of Arlans that were shot down by this airplane. Again, highlights the whole problem, how critical Arlans are in the whole operations of Russian military. It's effectively providing significant strategic and tactical advantage over Ukrainian military, and Ukrainian military still does not have anything similar to it, even though Arlan 10 is very simple, very straightforward piece of equipment, and not only Ukrainian military does not have anything similar, but there's not even organizational structure that could absorb it and use it effectively and successfully. So, and this example is example of disastrous approach on the Ukrainian side to addressing all of this challenges that Ukrainian military is facing. The other development that I wanted to mention is probably everyone knows that there is a lot of this FPVs or kamikaze UAVs or drones that are being used for personal attacks, to attack equipment and so on. And the most effective solution on the battlefield against those is actually shotguns, which would be total surprise. You would never think that shotgun is any useful for war, and it turns out that they are actually in high demand. So shotguns are not that easy to find, not that easy to buy, just because they are fairly efficient tools to defend yourself, a self-defense tool against FPV. And so you can see here, this is Russian person who is using a detector in his hand. As you can see in his left hand, he has a detector, FPV detector, and then he's using the shotgun to shoot them down. The diameter or caliber of that works actually is, and I show here, is this 12 gauge. I'm definitely not expert in this, but basically it's a 12 gauge and up. So 12 and 10. The smaller ones they're not really effective against those FPVs. Actually, here's a good moment to show where Belarus and potentially Russian troops are amassing. So there is a town here called Overych, which is straight north of town Korostin, closer to Belarus border. So Russian troops, so let's say Belarus troops, are amassing on the opposing side, and that is beyond, outside of Chernobyl. This is the only closest to Kiev border crossing. So that would be main border crossing into Belarus from Kiev. So there is a road that essentially goes to Kiev through this. So I'm not saying that this could be sort of attack is imminent or anything, but again, this is pretty clear threatening Ukrainian capital. Now I'm actually gonna do walks through the front line the way I always do, in a clockwise fashion. So the situation along the state border up to Kharkiv remains more or less stable. Nothing special going on there. Now let's look at the situation around Kharkiv. Things remain stable. So the front line stabilized. I would say Ukrainian forces don't have enough resources to finish the squeeze of Russian troops. As I mentioned before, they split this, call it bridgehead, into two pieces, and at this point they, I would say, bogged down, and there's not enough resources to finish the job. So the front line is moving in Vovchansk. So essentially there are only two main sections of the front line. One is this area around Hlyboke, where it's contested. Ukrainian forces attempting to take it. Obviously, Russian forces preventing that. And the other one is Vovchansk. So essentially, the whole, even it appears pretty big, the front line, it narrowed down to very small sections, just because both sides don't have resources to actually do anything meaningful, like to fight on the wide front line. This is just original older picture, how it used to be. Now let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here remain more or less the same. Russian forces continuing their pressure towards Kupiansk and generally to eliminate Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side of this stream, and then also actually create their own bridgehead on the western side, but sort of on their sort of northern section of it, closer to Kupiansk. There are small advances here and there, but nothing so far major. And this is Azov is actually that the one that I was talking about. It's called 12th Brigade. Azov is actually fighting in this area. Now let's move to the North Donbass section of the front line. Here things also not going well for Ukraine. Russian troops did capture this village Rozdolivka here, and believe they also initiated close to capturing Spirne. So there are small, basically, advances here as well. Now let's in the southern section, Russian troops very clearly blocked down. There are some advances. They are basically coming closer on the wider front to this channel, freshwater channel. But again, they are very far away from capturing Chasiv Yar, but they slowly grinding forward. Let's put it this way. Except the grind is very expensive and extremely inefficient, and I don't think that the level of inefficiency that's happening will that basically it forces Russian command to reconsider and potentially reallocate most of their available resources from here to areas where they actually do have success. This is just, as I stated, the goal right now is simply to get to this freshwater channel, and Ukrainian actually forces at this moment still control part of this Kalinivka, so it's not sort of done deal for Russian side. Now let's look at the Central Donbass section of the front line, where things are really the worst for Ukrainian forces. Russian troops continuing their push. They confirmed to capture Sokil and actually captured eastern part of Yevgenivka. So they're moving sort of forward. Apparently, Ukrainian forces were forced to evacuate Yasnobrodivka, as I mentioned before. It's sort of cut off at this point, so you kind of need to evacuate. It's here on a tactical level. It's just there's not much you can do here. But again, Russian troops are advancing slowly but surely westwards, and the most sort of the strongest push is around this railroad on both sides from Novoalexandrivka, basically Novoselivka Persha. So this is the main push area. This is a little bit older picture, so you can see there's not huge, there are no huge advances, but nevertheless they sort of systematic and happening more or less every 3, 4, 5 days. This is I just updated a little bit more from a bigger picture. It's kind of catch up for several probably months or so. So it may not be. It doesn't mean that this happened over past 3 days. It's just bigger picture. Just catch up over a longer period of time. But now you can see how this whole situation is, I would say, getting worse and worse for Ukrainian forces, and potentially could be extremely dangerous, threatening situation if Russian command and Russian army were able to actually do proper offensives. This could be totally devastating, but they not capable of doing that, and also they also lacking enough resources to do that. So this turns into sort of improved version of the squeeze, better than how it's done on the Ukrainian side, but still not quite what sort of proper attack or offensive would be. And so far, Russian troops bogged down south of this area. Don't even know how to call it, west of Avdiivka, I guess. So all of this Marinka, Krasnohorivka, Novomikhailivka, so far there are no major Russian advances there. Now let's look at the situation on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are more or less quiet. Some probing attacks, some low-scale attack, but really no major pressure on this section of the front line. And let's finish with the situation along Dnipro River. Things here also quiet. There's not much going on here at all. As I mentioned before, both sides don't have resources to do anything meaningful, and so the most logical thing then to keep the minimum resources here and pull everything they can to the other areas where for Russian side is probably the Central Donbass section of the front line. That's it for the day. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.